Everyone, and welcome to, oh my gosh, it's the end of the third week of Devtoberfest. I cannot believe how time is flying. I'm Josh Bentley, Mr. Bluebeard. I answer to lots of different things, and I'm joined by our presenter today, Thomas Young. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, how you doing?
Very well, very well. I'm excited today because if anybody doesn't know the subject, welcome to How to Interview for an SAP Tech Job. I love this subject because I also am a mentor at SAP internally, and I talk to a lot of colleagues, and they come to me as part of different programs and say, "Hey, I would love to know what I need to do to position myself for my next career move." And I spend a lot of time doing that internally. I think it's important. I think it's important to coach people, to mentor people. And knowing ABAP and knowing CAP and Fiori, they kind of tease that in the session description. And we're really going to dive deeper into that. It's going to be like experiential things that you know from interviewing people that you want to bring on board. You know from the interviews you've done yourself. The tech landscape has changed a little bit since we both started, maybe over a couple of decades ago. So I'm gonna kind of leave it open to you to kick off your presentation. Then I'm gonna interject with questions either from the chat that I'll monitor, as well as questions that I kind of pre-wrote down of some do's and don'ts. And anyway, the next hour or so, we're gonna be talking about this stuff. Feel free to chime in, like I said, in the YouTube chat window, and I'll be monitoring that in the background. And Thomas, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Josh. One thing I wanted to say is, you know, a lot of this that we're going to talk about today, interviewing, the job market, the whole experience, it varies a lot from region to region.
And welcome to, oh my
And
God, it's the
it varies a lot from region to region. And I want to share my perspective, both as somebody who has interviewed for jobs in North America, works today at SAP, has conducted interviews as well, but is also aware that the job market is different for um, people that are new to the SAP world or the tech world in general. Those of you that are in interviewing in different regions of the world. It's also different whether you're really kind of interviewing for a job that is looking for somebody for 6 months to 2 years, sort of almost temporary work, or somebody who's hiring hopefully for, a career, 10-year plus. Both the interviewing process and the experience when you go through that is different. I'm going to share from my experience as both an interviewer and an interviewee. Josh is here as well, similar experiences, but we do ask that you ask your questions in the chat, and Josh will keep an eye on that. I have it open in my other window, and so if you see me glancing over here, that's probably what I'm doing. Is also looking at the chat, but Josh is going to keep an eye on it for me too and interject. But with that, let's go ahead and jump in. I can find my mouse. There we are.
and we've already
Um,
got a question in chat. So
yeah,
yeah,
I
you're
know.
queuing up, Tom.
Yeah, I know. Well, I want to take a look at a couple things first. Uh, First, I want to talk a little bit about, and this is more the emotional side of it, or the personal side of it. What happens when you find yourself without a job? So let's talk about that for a few minutes to start off. I want to give you a few tips and tricks that I found when preparing your CV or resume. And then we'll really get into the interview aspects, which I think is probably where a lot of our questions will come up. Um, but before we get into the heart of that, this whole agenda point that I wanted to start with here on finding yourself without a job. Um, it's something that I have personal experience with as well. In 2019, I was laid off from SAP. Our my whole division that I worked for was eliminated. So overnight, your entire team, your boss, your boss's boss, they're all gone. And increasingly, this is something that happens throughout our industry, and not just the SAP ecosystem, but everywhere. Every day you wake up and read about layoffs at very successful companies, and it has nothing to do with a company's finances hurting or anything like that. And in our world, on the programming side, on the developer side, we also see the challenges from AI. Now, whether it's realistic that AI is going to really, improve efficiencies enough that we see a reduction in developer headcount or not. Um, some companies aren't waiting to find out whether that's true or not, and we see some reductions and some shifting of resources. So it can happen to anyone, is kind of the point here. And but when it happens, and all of us at some point are going to face some sort of situation like this, a change in job, a reorg, finding yourself either without a job or not the right job, it can really impact you personally. Um, it can be a shock to, your confidence. It can be an emotional roller coaster, to be honest. And two pieces of advice that I would give, um, that I wish somebody had given me when I went through this, is one, you did nothing wrong. It has nothing to do with your performance. It has nothing to do with anything about you. Most of the time, when these things happen, it's numbers on a spreadsheet and it's not personal. It's not, it doesn't have anything to do with you. And in some ways, that makes it better. In some ways, that makes it harder. But, that hopefully, if you stop and you think about it that way, you realize that if once you realize it has nothing to do with you or your performance, it hopefully removes some of that hit to your confidence, that confidence that you're going to need to go out there and find that next job, to do that interviewing. So when you inevitably find yourself in that position, you got to keep that in mind. The other thing that I would say is don't be in a hurry. If you ever find yourself in that position, and I know, of course, you have to look at your own financial situation. Hopefully, people have, savings and emergency funds, something like that. Not everybody can have that, depending on where you are in your career. So there could be other reasons why you feel pressure to find that next job. But I'll tell you my experience. I felt pressure to find that next job, and it wasn't necessarily financial. Even if I would say that was my excuse, that was an excuse. It was, uh, because I think a big part of my self identity was wrapped up in what I did and who I did it for. When you talk to people, what's one of the first questions that you have in casual conversations? Oh, what do you do for a living? And so it's only natural that that becomes part of your identity. Oh, I'm a developer. Oh, I work for SAP. I work in the SAP world. And and when that went away overnight, um, that was scary because it was like, okay, who am I now if I'm not this person who does SAP development? And I put way too much pressure on myself to find that next thing really fast. And the advice I would have for people is take a breath, and give yourself time to adjust mentally, before you go finding that next job. I don't know if there are I'm sure there's lots of other people out there watching that have had experiences like this. Like I said, I think most everybody at some point in their career faces some sort of situation like this. And if anybody wants to share other points, it's an emotional thing.
Yeah, let me
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of jump in and share mine because
yeah,
and
sure.
somebody might throw something in the chat and it is emotional and is raw and it's happened to me twice. I've been
Yeah.
lucky, maybe it's only been twice, but twice I have been affected by either downsizing, layoffs, or not the right fit. The one I'll tell you about that goes with that phrase, like when a window closes, a door opens, So I didn't overreact, but I had, and some of my family members don't even know this, but they don't watch everything I do online anyway, so they probably won't see this. I got married in 1996, so I'm dating myself a little bit there.
Me too.
And wow, all right, so that means
So,
we're both coming up on our 30th anniversaries.
yes.
Jeez. I need to make plans. Oops. Um, so yeah, I know what I'm doing. It's not going to happen until 2027 probably. That's another discussion. I was basically married in Philadelphia, but lived in Atlanta, where I grew up. And so we had the wedding up in Philadelphia, and in between the reception that we did in Georgia, which was a few weeks after the wedding in Philadelphia. We went to our honeymoon, came home. In that 3 or so week period between the wedding and the local reception for family and friends in Georgia who didn't want to make the trip up to Philadelphia, I lost my job. And so everyone's shaking my hand and congratulating me and wishing me well in the next phase of my life. Didn't know that I was unemployed, standing there shaking their hand. And so to your point, I felt less than. I
Yeah.
felt like I was, what did I do wrong? To exactly what you said. Why am I not valuable enough to take care of my new, family moving forward? It was really raw and harsh. And then you fast forward a little bit because I ended up taking like a temp job. I went to work for a temp agency just to make ends meet, and it was the wrong fit. And I walked off a job. I've never done that in my life in other like smaller jobs and starting out in retail and other things as a kid. I had never quit a job, and I was working in a collection agency, calling people and asking them to pay their bills.
Yeah.
Very uncomfortable, harsh, raw phone calls that were horrible. And I went up to the manager after the first day, and I said, "Is there anything else I can do tomorrow besides this?" He's like, "Not really. This is a job." I came back and I did 2 hours, and I went up and I said, "Can I do anything else?" And he said, "No." He goes, "I'm surprised you lasted this long." So I self fired myself, and I
Yeah.
left a job that was paying the bills technically and to look for something I would be a better fit for. So to your point, I jumped too quickly.
Yeah.
I made that mistake. And then I ended up getting into a technology job that aligned better with my interest because of a referral from a friend. Hey, we're hiring apprentices to do telecom stuff. And it opened an entire world to me that I wouldn't have been able to do if I had stayed with my previous role. So it does work out. You
Yeah.
are not less than. You have to stay with it, stay true to your values, make decisions that are calculated, um, use your networks, and don't overreact, like Tom said. It's super scary, and I mean, look at where I am now, right? So I'm painting my face blue, and I'm talking to you about how to interview for a job because I didn't give up on myself or the things I cared about. So
Yeah.
it's
And
very, very harsh.
I guess to move on from a difficult subject here, hopefully on a high note, a lot of people have this experience and then they talk about how eventually they ended up in a much better place. And for me, that was certainly true. I mean, I've landed in the best job I've ever had at SAP or anywhere with a team that I absolutely love, and that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone through what I did. So you know, it does work out often for the better in the end. That doesn't mean there aren't struggles to get there in between. So,
Yep.
yeah. Well, let's transition to a little lighter note. But I think that was an important thing to start with because I think a lot of people are, will struggle with that at some point. Let's talk about preparing your CV or your resume. And one of the things that I want to start with is just some tips and tricks that I've used in the last couple of, years as I went through this. I went from, um, uh, not having done an interview in quite a few years because I had worked for SAP for so long to doing 20 plus interviews a day. So I felt like I was back in the deep end of things when I was going through this. But one thing that I have found that's very helpful is I, maintaining your information on LinkedIn. Um, because, and I'll show you in a second here, they've got a nice little tool that will create a resume automated out of all your information that you maintain. And to me, this has a dual benefit. And in our industry in particular, in the current day and age, um, I know I, as a hiring manager, LinkedIn is like one of the first places I'm going to go. I want to see what professional information that somebody has shared, what content that they've shared, find out a little bit more about them. Before I interview them, if I have a resume that I've screened and I like, before I decide whether I'm going to interview them or not, I'm going to go try to look them up online, and I'm going to start at LinkedIn. So having a good amount of information is beneficial, good experience history. detailed. And, I've been at SAP, almost 20 years, as you see here, but I've detailed all the different roles that I've had at SAP as well. And that's something that sometimes people overlook. They'll put in just, I've been at such and such company for X years, but we take different roles at different times. I've had literally different roles where I've interviewed and taken a different role inside of SAP. And it's important to break those out as well, because otherwise it would kind of be a black hole of experience there. And I mean, 20 years is a large period of time. I've had a lot of different roles in that 20 years. So maintaining a good history, but not just the history and, of course, the education, the certification, maintaining your skills. Those are all important things. But the other thing that I personally really look at is your activity. Your recent post, but also your featured post. When I go and look at somebody's content, I'm really looking at that. So I personally spend time curating things like my featured post. Not because I'm looking for a new job, but because people do look at my profile, hopefully looking for help, looking for content. So it has a dual purpose, and here in advocacy, I use it to, I see you see a lot of Tech Ed and Devtoberfest promotion on here. I'll swap those things out. So it has a dual purpose. But you can use this to promote yourself. I'm obviously using it to promote the things that our team or the SAP organization does, but you can use this to promote yourself. The articles that you write, you contribute to an open source project. These are things that should show up in your activity. And then the most important ones should be in your featured activities here as well. Think of this as the marquee of you, as if you were a show or you were a movie, what would you put out as your marquee or your storefront? And you look at it in very much the same way. Because a CV or resume is important for communicating, for perhaps getting past that first screening that may or may not be AI based these days. But once a human is looking into you, you want something more than that CV, to be honest, and something interactive, something with rich content, something with a variety of information, like the LinkedIn profile, is really important. But then it's doubly good because, like I said, I can come here and I can say save to PDF, and it creates a very resume-like version of the information for you. Now, why it's running so slow, it's a good thing I downloaded one of these yesterday when I was testing all this too. And of course, when I go to demo something, it's not our software. It doesn't decide to work, but normally it creates a nice little PDF for you. I think I have it. I think I have one handy here from yesterday.
And while you're pulling that up, I'll point
Yeah,
out that this is a two-way street with
yeah,
people that you are going to go interview with. They
yes,
look at, so if you're knowing who the hiring manager, look at that, me in the pink coat. Come on.
yeah. I know.
So if you're looking at the hiring manager's profile on LinkedIn, it gives you insights into how to be ready for the interview and understand where they came from. And you're not
Yeah,
trying to like say things to make sure that you are, how do I say this gently? They know when you're just trying to please them with the questions you ask based on their research. I can tell, like, oh, tell
yes,
me about, I'm interviewing for a job, but tell me more about blah, blah, blah. What you want to say is, oh, they're very into data and analytics. So I want to make sure that when we're talking about anything to do with our upbringing or where we came from or what we went to school for, we focus on that because I can see that the interviewer is going to be really in tune with any data and analytics questions and answers that we talk about because that's in their LinkedIn profile.
that was absolutely one of the points I was going to make in a minute, which was you
Boom.
should do the reverse. Once you have the interview, you should absolutely do the reverse and go check out both the page of the interviewer and of their company, and do the same level of research on them that they're probably going to do on you. It's very
Yep. And you might
beneficial.
find that you're connected to some of the people as well
Yeah.
already in LinkedIn that work for that company. You can go look at their
Yes.
GitHub repositories, see the things they've committed to. So
Yeah.
it is a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah. And that's really to doubly emphasize the point about asking the I really hate that as an interviewer when somebody asks that question that you could tell was like, oh, you went to the company homepage and found a piece of trivia about the company and you forced it into a question to show off that. I really don't like that. But having that background knowledge and then, you know, keeping that in mind without directly referencing it when you answer a question or something like that, that's super valuable. So it is a little bit of a careful tightrope you got to walk there. But yeah, if LinkedIn had produced the PDF, this is exactly what it would look like. This is the one from the other day that I did to test all this out, which I'm very glad I did. As DJ pointed out, being prepared, having backups, also good when interviewing. I do these sort of things. Bring a paper copy, have a paper copy available, have a backup of the PDF handy. You never want to be caught off guard of like they're looking at your resume and you don't have a copy of it and they reference something and you're like, oh, I can't remember if that was on there or not. Always have that in front of you. But this is what was produced by LinkedIn. I'm not sure I'm crazy about the format. I would definitely touch this up and probably trim it down. 5 pages is probably quite a bit. I had a professor at university many years ago that said at the time your resume should be no longer than 1 page. And I don't know if what people are still getting as their recommendation coming out of university. I think a younger person coming out of university with less experience, it's probably not a bad idea to try to have a 1 page. I tell you, when I'm looking at resumes and I get a 6 to 10 page resume, I'm probably glancing through most of it, not sitting and reading the whole thing.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think so. We had one question from somebody in chat already, and
yeah,
it's they want it as a internship working student kind of thing. I would say it's important that the resume is not filled with fluff either. So
yeah,
if it's too short, it's okay. I don't want to discount the fact that you worked in retail at a pizza shop.
yeah,
That's great. But if you're applying for a job as a data analytics person, that's what you went to school for. Tell me more about the projects you worked on. Tell me some things you can cite, the data that actually goes into what's going to help us in the role. Having that fluff on the resume can also be not negative. I understand you had to have summer jobs or whatever, but it really doesn't tell me about how you're going to help us in the role we're looking to fill. So just be careful not to have too much of that. It's okay to be
yeah,
human and say I did a summer job and I was working the same way that I didn't bring this point up earlier, Tom. I think it's important. If you do have a lack of continuous employment, it's okay if someone asks you what were you doing during that year to say I took some time off to reevaluate what I wanted to do in my next step. You don't have to say you were
yeah,
fired. You don't have to say you were laid off. Just say I realized that other role wasn't right for me and I'm moving on to another part of my life and I took some time to make sure I made a good choice.
yeah.
So don't lie, but don't also give them the whole answer that you lost your job if you're not comfortable saying that. But you need to be able to explain away those gaps in the resume.
Yeah. And just on that point, gaps in the resume, as a hiring manager, I think some of the culture has changed around that as well, where that used to be a really negative thing. For at least me personally, when I see a gap in the resume, I don't even question it anymore.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even ask the person about it. I just don't think that it's an issue or it's just I see that on resumes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So don't sweat it. It's
And
my point. Yeah. Don't worry about it.
yeah. And I would, as an interviewer, I wouldn't even ask the person about that. It's just so common now for that to happen for so many different reasons. And I know I was told, 20, 30 years ago, probably like you were, that you've got to account for any gap in your resume, right? You never want to have a gap in your employment history. And I think culturally we've shifted. But I also say if you would get that question, don't be afraid to answer it exactly as Josh said. There's no shame in that, or any other reason. And I also feel like, yeah, I took time off for personal reasons and leave it at that. It could be you're taking care of a loved one who needed additional medical care, taking care of children at home. It's not really your employer's business, and it doesn't impact your ability to do your job. So
No,
yeah,
so to me, the two real the things that were the landmarks that changed were the dot-com burst and then the '08 crash of the market. After those two incidents, no one ever
oh
questioned
yeah,
gaps on resumes.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. So going back to the resume, I've got this nice collection of information that I easily curate over time with LinkedIn, and then it keeps it up to date. Anytime I want to extract it, it's available. So that's one nice feature. But this probably isn't what I would send out these days. Like we said, it's a little too wordy. Formatting's not great. But what I would do is I would go to AI. And this is an area where you can use AI because everybody processing your resume these days is using AI to process it, right? So what I would do is I would go to AI and I would upload this output from that I got from LinkedIn. Explain that real quick. Yeah, and then I'd ask it to and rather than type, I did this one the other day too. So let's come over here and see a couple of the prompts that I asked for. I told it, okay, here's my profile from LinkedIn. Now turn it into a CV that's optimized for AI scanning and consumption, but is also attractive to the human eye. So I know AI has tricks about how it processes a resume and optimizes the information, and things that it's looking for. And you can use AI to your advantage to also ask it to do that same optimization so your information is ready to be consumed by AI. And it's interesting the way it reformatted it. Both it gave me a preview of how it formatted it. It changed the order of things. It changed the emphasis of certain things. And then I'm able to ask that for either another, even said a PDF ready subtle SAP Blue, or I'd probably want it output in text so I can then go format it according to some of with my own unique look and feel or things like that. But I'm going to take a lot of the input of how it organized the information or reorganized the information as some really important best practices for AI scanning. Because in today's world, you got to first get past the AI scanning of your CV before a human being is even going to look at it. So that's the first important hurdle. I would even be tempted to offer the interviewer a different version of my resume or CV, just formatting wise, than the one that I would submit automated, because I'm going to have one that's super highly optimized for AI to get me through the scanning, and I'm going to have a different one that I would present to the interviewer, or if we were uh, in person interviews, I would hand them a fresh copy of my CV resume on paper. In this day and age, you may not be interviewing in person, but I would still offer them, say, a fresh PDF and say, "Hey, here's one that's more optimized for human readability. My original one was optimized for AI." And frankly, I've never had someone interviewing do that to me, but I would be pretty impressed by that if they did. How are we doing on questions? Because I'm about ready to transition into the interview phase itself, but any questions related to CVs, resumes, anything we want to tackle now before we go into the next section?
One user here has asked a question and then added on to it. So, can you cover how to crack work as a student at SAP? I'm well aligned for a role but cannot get through, based in Germany. And then he follows up by asking, having tech experience for a student job a disadvantage, like too qualified for the role, 8 years of tech experience, and a master's student?
Hmm. Okay, yeah, this is a good point to tackle that question because it is a little bit more specific to the student experience. Now, I'll answer specifically at SAP, getting in as a student means getting an internship, right? And we have a very large internship program. In fact, our team, the developer advocates, we have an intern right now, Bira, who you might have seen um, on our YouTube channel in the developer news once or twice. She's done a couple of segments. She is a working student. Now, getting in, although I think we have lots of positions, and we do numerically. But I know, like when we interviewed for the position where we hired Abira, I mean, I went through 50 plus candidates. So there's a lot of competition. And of course, I can only hire one of those 50 I very quickly narrowed the 50 down to like 15 to interview. But honestly, at the end of the day, there was very little that separated all the top candidates. A lot of very good. If I could have hired 10 of those people, I could have very easily done so, right? But and I have to make the choice of the one. Um, so does your does a deep amount of experience harm you? No, I don't think so. As long as you're interested in doing being a working student, and maybe that means working part time, 20 to 30 hours a week. As long as you're okay with that, starting in that position, uh, I don't, being having a lot of tech experience doesn't exclude you. But at the same time, when I'm looking for a student, um, I'm not looking for a particular experience, a particular skill. Um, and maybe this gets us a little bit into the interviewing process in general. So I'll talk about some of the things that I'm looking for when I'm filling a position, whether it's a student position or a full-time developer advocate, as we've done many times in the last couple of years, interviewing and hiring people. I am not looking for a particular skill. I do not, say you need X number of years of ABAP experience. Even if I'm looking to fill an ABAP developer advocate position, I wouldn't be looking for that. And I realize that's different than maybe somebody that's looking to staff a position, on a project where they need a particular skill. They're probably looking for somebody that has years in that skill. But I am looking for different things. I am looking for how well does this person learn? Um, and that may sound kind of like a very soft, very difficult thing to analyze in an interview, but I'm looking for subtle clues of like, are they a self learner? Do they learn quickly? Do they enjoy learning? Because there's a lot of learning on the job. And I used to do the same thing, like when I would interview people for PM or development positions as well. I'm really first and foremost looking for somebody who has a learning passion, because skills change so fast. And if I'm hiring somebody for more than a year's outlook, even if they come in with a skill, that isn't necessarily going to be the skill they need in a year or two. So I'm not so concerned about skill X and Y, but how quickly they can learn on the job. My second criteria before I get to any particular skills, I'm looking for good communication skills. So important. And of course you might look and say, well, yeah, of course, a developer advocate has to have good communication skills. They have to, be on camera and they have to write a lot and whatnot. But again, this was the same major criteria that I would use when I was hiring, or interviewing people in before I came to developer advocacy, when I was involved in either hiring developers or product management days. Um, Communication skills are so important, and I think this is largely how good developers stand out. Uh, Coding skills are important, but being able to communicate when it comes to gathering requirements from your stakeholders, communicating those requirements and how you're going to fulfill them back to those stakeholders, communicating to the rest of your team when it comes to peer reviews, sprint reviews, things like that. The developers that can do those things, in addition to their coding task, are the ones that are going to stand out the most, whether that's in the interview or long term in the job. So that is so important. And only once like I see real positive things on both the ability to learn and the ability to communicate well do I even start evaluating actual technical skills and where the person is. So those two things are so much more important
Yeah, let me augment this, and
Yeah.
so I'm not trying to step on your answer, just but when someone thinks they're too qualified, that's not the problem. It's not that we look and evaluate and go, oh, you think you're too smart for the team, or you think you're already at a level that's higher than a student. We never would do that. It's more the thirst for knowledge, the being a team player. We're a company of 110,000 people now. We're huge, and a lot of other tech companies like us are huge. Or you could go to a startup. The idea is that you have to be able to work with people to get through those sprints, and you have to be able to show that you've done that either as a student in projects at school or you've done it on the job, and we can reference that as the process we can expect from you once you're here. SAP, I like to talk about in thirds, is a huge company. A third of the company is the support mechanism, the back office, the accounting, the finance, the marketing, all the things that go into like running the engine of the company in the back office that bleeds into the front office, the sales and marketing people that are in front of people out there doing that part of it. And then the other part's the engineers, the ones building the code that makes the products. All of these have to work together at SAP. So if you're listening to us and you're watching this as part of Devtoberfest, you're probably more towards the ones that are aligned with the engineers and
Yeah.
people building the code and looking at what happens in some of our labs offices. It's very competitive. These are skills that are necessary but can be learned. uh, the technology is going to change no matter what. And as Tom said, with AI, things are changing even more rapidly. So it's how do you, I look when I built, look, I worked for Tom, right? I was a developer advocate. And when we talk about being a developer advocate, one of the things that I mentioned is being able to stand in front of the room and own the room. And how do you do that? That doesn't come natural to some people to stand in front of other people and talk about technology and present and guide them through a curated session of an hour or a day long. These are things that you learn over time by doing it. I got this skill, luckily, from other jobs I had had before, especially pre-sales at SAP. They really trained me how to go out and fail early and often. And we did dry runs, we did practices together. So that's the real nugget I want you to have is whatever you're interviewing for, the communication skills are so important because then we can see how you're going to interact once you're talking to colleagues, coworkers, or even potentially customers.
Yeah, and I see a follow-up question here that I think now's a good time to address. Someone it just scrolled and I lost my place. I went to a career fair for a student opportunity. An expert told me that you were too qualified for the role, and that took me back a bit. I want to make 2 points about that. First, we assume, and it's natural, particularly when you're starting off in your career, when you interact with somebody that's more senior or in a position of authority, like an interviewer, you assume they're all great at what they do, right? Every interviewer you talk to must be great at interviewing. But I can tell you there are people who are terrible at being an interviewer as well. And you will get bad advice as well. So don't assume that every piece of information that you get back from an interviewer or somebody in that position is good advice. Because you can see both Josh and I have sort of counterjected the advice that person gave you. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is that, as I mentioned earlier, not every job is looking for the same thing. When I'm hiring somebody, particularly like in a developer advocate or a PM role, I'm hiring for a career. I'm hiring somebody that could potentially spend the rest of their career at SAP. And that is a very different criteria than if I were staffing a position for 6 months or a year. Both in the skills that I'm looking for and maybe the situation of the person involved. That recruiter could have very well in their mind been thinking about filling a position on staffing a hole in a project, and knowing exactly what that person was going into. It could have been a very entry level position too. They could have been saying, you're going to be bored in that position. Maybe it was data entry, essentially. So there's lots of different reasons why you could get that. And you can't apply any sort of blanket reasoning to that to say, oh, I can't break into tech because I got too much experience. No, but maybe they were just giving you bad advice, or maybe they were really giving you good advice for the particular situation they had in mind. And there's as I said, there's a wide range of those out there.
Okay, so we have a few questions coming around the
Yeah.
same subject now, certification. So let me read a couple of
Certification.
these and then you can answer it.
Yeah.
What's your view on companies ignoring the latest certifications acquired and still expecting real experience on relatively latest SAP products and technologies, for example, S/4HANA development? Number two part of this is experience or wrap experience. While it's difficult to get such experience unless we have a chance to work on that product. And then a follow-on came on right as I was talking. One more thing, are certificates necessary? And I want to know if I'll get a job right away when I graduate in 2027. So answer that,
Yeah.
Tom.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my thoughts on certification. Eh, eh, Not every interviewer is equal. Again, um, and certifications are a way of leveling the playing field, largely based upon the experience and qualifications of the person performing the interview. You may be being interviewed by somebody who is a professional manager. You may be being interviewed by somebody who is a recruiter and has no technology specific knowledge themselves. You may be being interviewed by somebody who has 30 years experience coding in the particular thing that you're interviewing for. Those are three very different experiences, right? And the level of the ability of the interviewer to evaluate your skills in a short amount of time varies greatly between those interviewers. When I look at certifications and I'm doing an interview, I feel as though with the level of tech experience, hands-on tech experience that I have, I can judge more asking that person a few very pointed questions about the technologies they list than I can get from a certification. But somebody else can't necessarily do that, and they need the certification to basically say someone else has asked you those pointed questions. So, never knowing who you're going to be in front of in that interview, the certification is a way to bring in that evaluation from a third party that we can both trust to have asked you that question, right? And maybe that person is going to look at it and even I, when I look at the certifications that you have, depending upon what you have and who it's from, who's done the certification, I may ask less of those pointed questions because I can sit back and feel assured that someone else has already asked those questions for me. But somebody else may need to rely on those certifications to say that person that you've had that certification by that third party. So never knowing who you're going to be interviewed by, that is another tool in your tool belt to come in with to prepare yourself to present your skills. That you've been evaluated by a neutral third party that you both trust, both you and the interviewer trust, and they have vouched for your skills to a certain level. And I think that's the right way to look at that.
So let's tie that into the follow-up question here about how to interview or how to navigate FANG company interviews when applying for
Yeah.
SAP roles, since it involves several rounds of coding interviews using language other than ABAP.
Coding interviews. I hate coding interviews. I hate the idea of coding interviews. They are so artificial. And I've done them. Um, I have a fun one that I could share with you. Um, and I have never conducted one. Um, I would never conduct one as an interviewer. I don't feel that they really tell me anything as an interviewer. Um, they're so artificial, they're so fake, particularly in the day and age. It used to be, uh, you can't have a search engine handy. Now you would say you can't have AI involved. Well, that's not a realistic situation. We have those tools. And why would I? It's like telling you to code with both hands tied behind your back and then typing with your nose. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. It's so artificial of a situation, and it puts undue pressure, and people aren't accurately performing the way they're gonna perform for real. And I just feel like the outcome isn't realistic. Now, that said, it's a part of our industry, and even applying inside of SAP. I'm not going to say that every interviewer is going to take the approach that I would, and some are going to rely on coding interviews. And like I said, interviewing elsewhere in the industry, you very well could run across those. I actually during that time when I was looking for a new job. I interviewed at a large thing, and they gave me a coding test, and it was ABAP. And the person administering the test got on there, and once they saw me, they recognized me, and they know who I was, and then they were completely embarrassed by the coding interview and the process, and we had a nice discussion. It was a good experience, in the end. And I did their coding interview, I did their coding challenge, and we had a little fun with it. But it was a weird situation because they were like, I can evaluate you. You know more about ABAP than I do, and the person was very kind about it, but also a little embarrassed by it, and it was a funny situation for everybody. But you know,
So let's take that
yeah,
then and let's navigate into a few things that we haven't really talked on. What are some don'ts in interviews? What are some things people should
yeah,
not do? Because we have other couple of questions in chat that we'll get to later that are along the similar vein. But are there some specific red flags that you would want to put out there? Don't do this in an interview if you are the interviewee.
yeah. Dressing right. We talked about this beforehand. Josh and I are not actually dressed as I would for an interview today, and I kind of intentionally did that. I started to put on a nicer shirt, and then I thought, no, I'm gonna put on a t-shirt.
It's
But it is
Devtoberfest. We got
but
to
it
be
is a
ourselves,
Devtoberfest
right?
t-shirt, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of the theme. It used to be dress for the job you want to have, or I forget what the saying
Yeah.
is, and it used to be no matter what job you're applying for, come in a suit and stuff like that. And I don't actually think that's true. I think culturally that's changed, but you want to dress nice. If somebody shows up for an interview, and a lot of them are on camera these days, I mean, like everyone I have conducted and been a part of in the last even pre-COVID, we're all on camera, right? The flying and traveling face to face just doesn't happen that much anymore. Maybe for a second or third interview for a very high level job, but it just doesn't happen much. Don't show up in your pajamas. Don't show up in a t-shirt. Probably, a nice collared shirt or something like that. Dress up just a little, but not so much that you look out of place for the job that you're applying for, because in the tech world, you're probably not wearing a suit and tie every day, unless you research the culture of the company that you are interviewing for, and that is their culture. That is the case. I know one of the companies are in the area that I live in, that hires a lot of people around here. They're an SAP shop. I've visited there. They are kind of an old school company. They are still privately owned and operated by a family, and they are suit and tie every day, no matter what position you're in. And the developers, the ABAP developers that come in every day, they come in a suit and tie. And of course, the first thing they do is take their suit off and hang it on the back of their chair. But that's the culture. So it is important to research the culture of where you're looking into, because if I was interviewing there, I would absolutely wear a suit and tie because that is their culture. So try to know a little bit about the culture, match the culture. Other do's and don'ts.
Now, real
I would
quick to
say,
that, Tom, I
yeah,
will
yeah,
say that this is a male-dominated industry, and I
yes,
cannot give you advice as a woman on how to dress for an interview. I know the interviewer may or may not take that into account as the way that a woman should dress, and I don't want to tell you how to. So there is
yeah,
female appropriate clothing and attire. I would rather you research on your own. I just didn't want to avoid, we don't know how to answer that question as well, but as an interviewer, when I interview women,
yeah,
I would definitely be able to tell the difference between sloppy and business casual.
yeah, yeah. And that's all I'm looking for as an interviewer. Sloppy versus nice.
Yep.
That's
Yep. And to
that's
that point, you should
yeah,
show up and feel comfortable and confident in how you are dressed. It does come
yeah,
across. You present yourself better when you feel comfortable. So ask some friends and some family members, if possible, how does this look? Do I look
Yeah.
okay? Because I feel good in this. I want to go to an interview in it. I check the culture ahead of time. So do some research with friends and family to make sure you don't walk into a place unprepared.
Yeah.
And other do's and don'ts. I cut you off.
Other do's and don'ts. I mean, hopefully these are careful with. I wouldn't curse. You know, even if say the interviewer comes on there, and I've actually had this experience. The interviewer was really colorful with their language. I did not join them in that. I wouldn't even if that were the culture. I would avoid slang and regional terms just because could be miscommunication. You're often interviewing cross culture and cross national lines and things like that in this day and age. So just be conscious of that. I would not share much about my personal life, and because if you volunteer that information, it can be used in the hiring process, but the interviewer cannot and should not. Well, depends on your local laws. It varies, but most of the world has laws where they cannot ask you things about that, and I think that's one that unfortunately women have to be more careful with than men. And going back to like gaps and do in your history, or do you have children, your child care situation, things like that. It should not come into play, and it should not be asked by the interviewer. But just but I would not volunteer that information either, because if you do, it can be used, and a good interviewer should not, and a good company should not use that information, even if you do volunteer it. But I still wouldn't, volunteer too much about your personal life, your medical history, or things like that. It just doesn't have any bearing. It shouldn't have any bearing on the interview, and yeah, I would be cautious about it. Um,
Yeah, I would also
Other do's and
augment
don'ts.
that by saying, don't lie. You can
Oh, yes. Yeah.
deflect. So if someone asks you a question, do you have a car? Say, you know what, I can get to the job no problem as
Yeah.
required. Like you don't have to lie if you don't feel comfortable about certain things and you feel like you're gonna have to lie to cover it, that could be an uncomfortable position for you because you're setting the standard that you're never going to be honest with the hiring manager or the HR representative you're talking to. So never lie. You can say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't know. That's one of the most powerful phrases I use when I'm interviewing.
DJ has a good one. Don't keep looking at your phone. Put it away where you can't get it during the interview. I've experienced that. I'm interviewing somebody and they're looking at their phone. Maybe they're looking at their CV on their phone, but I
Well,
don't I don't know that.
let's test my Latin. I think CV is curriculum vitae. I don't know exactly what it means, but DJ can probably tell us that.
Oh yeah,
And while DJ is being so active in the chat, I would
yeah.
wonder if he has an answer to this one, and you, Tom, as well. I actually have interviewed a few times while at SAP just to stay sharp, to see what the
Ah,
industry is looking for.
yeah.
So even if you have a job, do still go on interviews. Keep yourself sharp with what's going on in the world.
I have done that too, although I was upfront with the person. I told them, "Well, would you mind in advance? Would you mind if we did this to keep my skills short, or I'll go to a friend in the industry, maybe even if they don't have an open position. I've done that before too, and done the same thing. Keep my skills sharp, or I've done it once. I did it once, not too long ago, when we were about to do some hiring ourselves and I was about to be an interviewer. And I was like, I want to refresh my skills of what this was like to be an interviewee. And I asked a friend in the area that I live in, can we do a mock interview where I'm the person being interviewed because I want to refresh my interviewer skills. Yeah.
All right, we had one earlier. I skipped over. I want to get to it now because we've got about 5, 6 minutes left.
Yeah.
Are there entry-level positions at SAP?
Yes, there's always entry level
What's
positions.
it called?
What's this called?
That's what the answer is, or the question. Are there entry-level SAP related jobs? What is it
Early
called?
talent is what we call it at SAP. So if you see something marked as an early talent position, or I don't know, does it display T level on the outside? Anything that's a T1 or a T2 is how we
Yeah.
classify it inside of SAP. That lets you know that it's an early talent position and entry level, meaning that we're probably just looking for proper schooling and not much else, maybe a certification as a student that certainly give you maybe a leg up, but we're not looking for particular experience, and the job is designed to help you build that experience. Yeah, we have those. We've hired some of those. Some of the people that you know on our developer advocates team came in as early talent. So absolutely.
Yep. I'm looking through.
Maybe before the next question, one last
Go ahead.
point I wanted to make on the interview process. Remember, you're interviewing the company as well. It is not just a one-way street. And it's also okay, both in the questions that you ask and post interview, to for you to decide that it's not a good fit for you. Um, and that can be that's not an unhealthy thing. It's far better for the person to decide this is not a good fit for me than for you both to mutually decide that at a later time after you've already been hired. But also, you're looking for a good fit in culture to your personality and things like that. I have also, after an interview, sat and said, no, this is not right for me. This is not the right job, or this is not the right company culture. I would not fit in here. And you have to be honest with yourself about that as well. And I know that can be hard to do, going back to your point, when you're feeling a little desperation, or you're feeling a little pressure to get something, to maybe turn down something that's good paying or good work. But you have to be honest with yourself, because even if it works, you're probably not going to be happy in that situation, and you don't want to put yourself through that.
So let's talk a little bit here in the last minute or so. The question that popped in my brain as you were saying that. How do you follow up? Do you send thank you notes? Do you reach out on a regular basis every 7 days? Like, how do you stay in touch? And then what do you do if you don't like the offer you get?
I think the thank you note, although in this day and age, is not I would not put a piece of paper in the mail like I did 30 years ago. I did typed and then hand signed and then letter carrier mail. Thank you. I don't think that's at all necessary, but an email or direct message follow up thanking the interviewer is, I think, critical. And I am surprised by how many people don't do that when I'm interviewing. And I'll tell you, if I've got a couple candidates and they're in a dead heat, and only one of them sent me a thank you afterwards, I can tell you which one I'm going to go with. If it literally comes down to that, it can be the deciding factor. So I think a thank you is critical, because you don't want if you are in a dead heat with other candidates, it might be the difference between getting the job or not. Following up beyond that, I don't know if every 7 days is necessary. I'll tell you, at SAP, it can be a very long process.
Hmm.
And it can have nothing to do with the candidates. Even once we decide, it can be weeks more before we can get the paperwork pushed through. And that's just the bureaucracy of a large company. And some follow up is not a bad thing, but I also don't want to have, tons of candidates pinging me every couple of days when it's going to be weeks before the process is done. So I think a good balance there is important.
So one of the
Oh,
things Mark Bernard said in chat is exactly ask a company for references, ask to speak to other employees. So these are going to give
yes.
you a feeling of the culture that you're coming into. I always ask that question when I'm in an interview. I ask them to describe their culture to me, or I've told other people that go on interviews, ask that question and see how they answer it. And are they open to letting you talk to people on the team, not
Yeah.
just the interviewers that are being put in front of you, but other team members? Because if they have nothing to hide, what do they care, right?
And as an interviewer, somebody that asks those questions, I'm impressed by that, because many people don't. They think they're not allowed to, or whatnot, or don't feel comfortable doing that. Somebody who's invested in finding out if they are the right fit for the culture at my company, that's a that's an insightful criteria, personality trait that is positive, and is another point in your favor.
All right, so we've got 2 minutes left. If you want to do a quick closing, Tom, any final thoughts? And then DJ's advertising another session in 30 minutes for Devtoberfest. So we want to make sure we give people time to go get a coffee.
Yeah. I mean, I hope this was helpful. I mean, a lot of this was from our personal perspectives, which is somewhat limited. Would be curious to see if people find this helpful, interesting. Is this a kind of discussion you'd like to maybe see again in the future? Maybe next year? Maybe we bring on different people with different perspectives. If there's interest, maybe somebody younger, earlier in their career, a female next time as well. If you like this kind of discussion, we can't cover every aspect. I would have liked to have had more time to talk about the impact of AI as a skill and some of those other things. We ran out of time. I definitely had that on my list of to dos, but there were also great questions that we wanted to address as well. But yeah, I mean, I think this is an important subject that we could cover more often as well. But let us know if you liked it and what you'd like to see in the future around this. Yeah,
Very good. All right. So yeah, a couple more sessions happening for Devtoberfest this today, and then we've got a great week next week before we start to really power down our computers and get on airplanes and fly over to Berlin or wherever we're
yeah,
going. So we hope to see everybody online for the rest of Devtoberfest. Good luck making it to Nerdvana, and really, really, really looking forward to the Tech Ed season this year. Back on site for the first time in a long time since 2019 in Europe.
yeah,
So can't wait to see everybody there. And if you're not going on site, please join virtually, register. We want to make sure that as much people as possible see all the great things we're going to showcase in the developer keynote.
yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your Devtoberfest.
Bye bye.
All right, that was great.
One second, one
Thanks.
second.
Oh.